in Africa just 12 months ago. Today, that number sits at about 3%, which is incredible. Infrastructure is slow. The fact that we've increased the amount of hash rate in the continent by an order of magnitude is thanks to incredible teams like Gridless, Trojan Mining, QRB Labs. You all know who you are. And my tinfoil hat prediction is that we'll see approximately 15% of global hash rate by 2027. So hopefully at the ABC in a few years from now, we'll be able to revisit this number. So I'd like to talk to you all for a moment about exogeny versus endogeny. I think that the continent is currently at the nexus of two paths. We're either going to see international entities, governments coming in, developing the Bitcoin mining, the Bitcoin infrastructure, and extracting that value out as they've done in the past. Or we can have exogeny, where you either have grassroots, like Gridless, mining, creating this access to energy, internet, and money, or even at the sovereign level. We've seen some really exciting MOUs between Kenya and the Kenyan government and Mara, and in Ethiopia, we're seeing the sovereign state start to mine Bitcoin. But essentially, the decision is here, right? Will we allow for the coming in and extraction of the value, or will we create that value here and then dominate, leapfrog in the 21st century? So just in Kenya and Ethiopia alone, to give you all a bit of context, there is enough stranded and potential renewable power to run the global Bitcoin network 5 times over. So we often talk about energy as scarce, right? I know people often say, oh, Bitcoin's boiling the oceans. It's, in fact, one of the most powerful tools we have in the energy transition, creating clean energy infrastructure for the modern world. So you can see here, obviously, there's a lot of different sources. Just with these 2 countries, with these 4 sources, in Kenya alone, you can power the global Bitcoin network several times over. In terms of Kenya's trajectory in addressing this infrastructure trilemma, right, the energy, internet, and monetary infrastructure problem. According to the government, there's about 80% electrical access. I think Eric had mentioned that this number actually might be inflated, that it actually might be quite lower. Internet access stands at around 41%, according to recent numbers. The banked population is quite high, but when they think about this figure, they mean in terms of access to payments, financial services. There's obviously also things like inflation to consider, where you might have access to financial services, but your money is losing value over time. It's being inflated away. And then just really quick note on how we would like to work with miners here across the continent. At SBP, we want to help Bitcoin unlock its clean energy potential. We want to show the world that it's, in fact, a really powerful tool in the energy transition. It's climate technology. And we do this through data and through partnerships with Bitcoin miners. So we want to bring all of the climate capital that currently sits on the sidelines to Bitcoin. There are trillions of dollars of institutional climate capital, sovereign capital, that won't buy Bitcoin, that won't enter into Bitcoin, because they're worried about the, we'll call it FUD. Well, they're concerned about the environmental impacts of Bitcoin. What we want to do is help Bitcoin miners to monetize their use of clean energy by essentially selling that data or selling that proof that they are mining with clean energy to these investors, thereby passing on the cost of clean energy procurement to the investors. And I think I'm almost out of time, so I'll try to run through this quick, but we've had some really exciting growth, currently working with between 20 to 25% of global hash rate. That's miners across several continents, over a dozen or 2 dozen countries. We continue to grow. We'd love to support more Africa-based Bitcoin miners. So certainly, if you'd like to get a business started, reach out to the Green Africa Mining Alliance, to us. We'd love to support you if possible. And if you'd like to learn more or reach out, let me know how I could be helpful. Thank you again to the ABC for having me, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. You still had 5 more minutes. Congratulations for keeping time. Once again, good afternoon, ABC. Good afternoon, guys. You know, the only way you're not going to doze off or you're not going to sleep during this session is if we communicate, okay? So good afternoon. Good, good. Just ask the person next to you, what is the most nonsensical thing you're still holding on that is still crammed in your mind? Like one thing that you have memorized and it is absolute nonsense in your mind. Please tell the next person next to you what that is. One thing that you know you have memorized. You have memory of it, you have memorized it, and it's absolute nonsense. It doesn't need to be in your mind. Please, very fast, very fast. Just one thing. Some of you just have, you don't have anything useless in your mind. Some of you, your minds are too polished. Only one thing that is very useless in your minds that you're still memorized, guys. Okay, guys are laughing. You guys don't have anything useless in your mind. You don't have, you're still not cramming that, your first love's phone number. It's quite useless at this moment. Okay, good. The people at the back, you don't have neighbors or you don't care to talk to people. Okay, good. So, I'm going to ask my partner Frank to come and introduce the next speaker. Guys, okay, we're back. If the person doesn't have anything useless, well, that's nice. Some of us have a lot. Kindly introduce the next speaker.
Yes, everyone. For our next speaker, if you got a chance to view her profile on Shed, I'm sure this talk is going to be groundbreaking. Amity Utara, please join us on stage for your presentation on Decoding Privacy, a Guide to Core Concepts.
Hello? Oh, hi. Hi, my name is Amity, and I am a Bitcoin Core contributor. And here I'm talking to you today about a high-level overview about privacy. Okay. Usually when we say the word privacy, we often think of it as this big, scary thing. I know many times I've gotten concerned of, okay, I know my privacy in the digital world is not very good, but, you know, it's too overwhelming. Let me go do something else. So my goal for this talk today is to try to make it a little bit more friendly, a little bit more accessible. If you walk away with one question that helps you engage thoughtfully with your own privacy, then that would be a success for me. So to try to strengthen our intuition of how to think about privacy, we're going to use this model of a tower of blocks, Jenga. The idea here is that this tower of blocks represents our privacy. And, the tower collapsing represents an irreversible consequence. So let's say your information is leaked and your financial transactions become available to your employer, and because of something that is on there, your employer decides to fire you. Or let's say in a more severe environment, the government finds out something and then you get sent to jail or detained. This would be an irreversible consequence that's represented by the tower falling over. And every time you leak some information and you reduce your privacy, that's represented by taking one block out of the tower. And the severity of this information that you reveal is represented by the height. So, for example, in Bitcoin, let's say you reveal some minor information. For example, by being here today, you are revealing that you're affiliated with Bitcoin. maybe that's a minor privacy leak and represented by one of these top green blocks. Something more severe, such as revealing which accounts are yours or what your private key is or something like that, could be represented by a red block. And the intuition, if you take one thing away from this talk today, it would be this intuition, that the strength of the structure matters more than any individual leak. Often we think that, oh my God, we're going to take one action and that's going to be the end of it. But if you think of a tower of blocks, it's rare that the whole thing is going to collapse based on one block. Usually what happens is you remove blocks, the structure becomes weaker, and over time that leads to it becoming vulnerable and being really easy to collapse. So it's also important to remember that perfect privacy doesn't exist. We are constantly revealing information about ourselves, and so you can't be perfectly private. And context matters. It doesn't matter how strong your structure is if you're up against a baseball bat. So there's this fundamental tension between communication and privacy. By being up here today, by talking to you all, I'm revealing critical information about myself that if I was in a very high threat environment, the fact that I'm a Bitcoiner, the fact that I'm up on stage talking about privacy could be really risky to me. I'm choosing to do this because I want to communicate. I want to help you all engage critically with these topics. And so I'm choosing to do that. But there's always this fundamental tension between communicating and being private. In Bitcoin, in order to participate, you need to tell everybody, hey, move money from this account into that account. You need to communicate that information. But you're also trying to keep private some information such as exactly who you are, what your name is, what your passport number is, what your address is, all of that. So there's a tension here that's always going to be there. So to discuss privacy, I have this framework of 3 principles to help better engage. 1, it's adversarial. 2, it has dimensions. And 3, privacy likes friends. So let's dig in. What do I mean by the idea that privacy is adversarial? Well, if you lived in a bubble and there was nobody else in your world, then there would be nothing to keep private. The concept of privacy wouldn't exist because there's nothing to obscure or obfuscate from another entity. So, okay. So it's adversarial and it's in relation to this other entity. So then, when you're thinking about your own privacy, you want to think about how motivated are they? Why are they motivated? What are their abilities to get this information? So if you're thinking about your Bitcoin transactions, it might be different if you're trying to figure out how to keep it safe from theft versus if you're trying to hide from your government that you participate in Bitcoin because you're in an environment where it's illegal. And there's always this dynamic of privacy being an arms race. As the entities that are trying to get the information get better at extracting it, the entities that are trying to hide the information get better at hiding it. This is very true in our digital world. This is very true in the Bitcoin world. So it's a dynamic thing that's ever changing. And the one piece of advice that I would give you is that if you're trying to improve your privacy, then pay attention to the tools that give you access. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you need to do more stuff, that you need to learn more technologies or figure out a safer setup or go get involved in a community that can teach you to do more and learn better techniques. That might be true. Those things are very relevant. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of that. But what I'm trying to say is first start with the things you are using. If you're sending Bitcoin to a friend or a shopkeeper, well, they know that you're participating. They have information about you. If you're using an exchange or a wallet, it's really important if you are giving them your information, like your address or your identity, that can be linked. So start by looking at the things you are using before you move on to try to figure out better technologies or better systems. The next principle is that privacy has dimensions. It's a gradient. It would be a lot easier if we could just say, oh, I am private or I am not private, and you could just fix it. But something that's very important to remember is that there's a gradient of behavior. You could be leaking a little bit of information or a lot of information, and so you have to apply that in your thinking about how to navigate your context. So in Bitcoin, something that's important to remember is that you could have perfect on-chain behavior. You might be completely up to date on the best practices and using your own non-custodial wallet and managing your UTXO set and doing coin joins in addition to other obfuscation techniques. But it wouldn't matter if you go and tweet, hey, look at my transaction. So it's a layered thing, and you have to remember that and be aware of your interactions at different layers. And it's relevant to calibrate for the consequence. Depending on what environment you're in, what government you're in, what your risk profile is, your need for privacy and your risks of not having it can be highly different. If you're a high-profile activist that people have a reason to have a target on your back, then your privacy matters in a different way than if you're somebody that doesn't have a public-facing profile. Next principle is that privacy likes friends. We're going to use the metaphor of face masks. If you were wearing a face mask, you would be keeping something private, which is the contents of your face. Maybe you're wearing a face mask and some eye goggles, and so now people don't know what your face looks like. But there's a way in which you're making yourself extremely identifiable. Because if you were doing that in this room, you would be the only one. And so somebody out there could say, hey, yeah, it's the person in the face mask. And so while you're keeping the contents of your face private, you're actually very identifiable, which could be reducing your privacy in a different way. So it would be a lot better if everybody was wearing face masks. Unfortunately, the current state of Bitcoin is not very private. And this is important to understand, especially if you are in a high-risk context. The good news is that there's a lot of ongoing development. We're trying, as an ecosystem, in many, many different ways. I look at this lens, at the protocol development lens, and there's a lot of projects that are trying to make the default behavior a lot better. And if we can improve the default behavior, that would be the best, because then we would have friends. We want all of those transactions to be wearing the face masks so that you can't tell one from another. That would be the ideal scenario that we are working towards. So, as a reminder, these are the three principles: that privacy is adversarial, it has dimensions, and it likes friends. This is true in Bitcoin, this is true in your digital privacy, and this is true in any information that you are trying to keep protected from other entities. So in Bitcoin, what are we trying to keep private? And one could be that you use Bitcoin. If you're in a very risky situation, the fact that you use Bitcoin could be used against you. There are several governments that have declared Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies completely illegal. There are reports of people who've been detained for attending a Bitcoin meetup that isn't even affiliated with any Bitcoin transactions that they made. So for some people, you need to keep that private. Another thing that more ordinarily, probably for the majority of us in the room, that we're trying to keep private is which transactions are ours. Like we were talking about earlier, you need to tell the network to move funds from one account to another, but you don't want that to be associated with your real-world identity. And there's some examples of this really mattering. In Nigeria, there were stories of people's bank accounts and their crypto accounts being shut down because of being affiliated. So the bank accounts were shut down because there was a transaction that was affiliated with some crypto platform or some wallet or exchange. So, and sometimes it was cases where they might have had a transaction a long time ago and then forgotten that that even happened. They don't identify as a Bitcoiner or a user, but then, oh my God, my bank account has been frozen. So keeping your real-world identity separate from your Bitcoin usage can be very important. And another thing that you might be trying to keep private is which transactions are associated with each other. And the example I'm going to use for this are the protests here in Kenya. There was a lot of decentralized coordination to make these financial protests happen. And the governments were trying to figure out who's in charge, who's affiliated, who's part of this. And I don't believe that they were very aware of Bitcoin surveillance and financial usage. I think it was more in communication platforms. But this is something to keep in mind, because if one person is identified, oh, this is a central freedom fighter, they're coordinating and they're getting repercussions, well, we don't want that to lead to everybody that they are affiliated with and the entire movement going down. So for different circumstances, we also want to break those connections of who is affiliated with one another. So just as a reminder, these are the principles, and hopefully as we're moving through these talks, they make a little bit more sense in context. You should be thinking about who are you trying to keep information private against? What is the scale, the gradient of that privacy? And, okay, thanks. And the fact that if you can blend into a crowd, you will have better privacy. And so in privacy communication, we say anonymity sets, but essentially that just means that privacy likes friends. And it's important to remember that there is no such thing as perfect privacy. I said this before, and I'm saying it again because I know it happens for me, and I know it's easy to fall into the idea of I should either, rip the Band-Aid and figure it out and become really private in my digital presence and in my personal presence and figure out how to do everything perfectly. And this is a fallacy. Perfect privacy doesn't exist. So what's important is to take one step. So if this talk can encourage you, think about one step that you can do to improve your privacy. And also remember that context matters. Think about what your environment is. What are your risks? That's my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Guys, just the guys at the back, yeah? I don't think it's very mindful of you to be that noisy when people are talking up here. It's not mindful. It's not what? It's not demure. Please, the guys at the back, when someone is at the front, let's give them their time. Let's be mindful. Thank you. That said, did they hear? They didn't? Okay, the guys at the back, what we're saying is that you're not mindful when we're up here and you're louder than us. That's what we're saying. Thank you. You're not being mindful, you're not being demure. The next speaker coming to the stage, she is coming to, this is interesting. First, are you all unscared? You're all unscared by now? You're not? So you don't know what is happening in this conference? Even tomorrow? Wow. Yeah. Scared has like a guy in space. The profile, yeah? He's just there floating in space. So kindly download it so that we are together. If you need any help, there are guys with the sashes written ABC. ABC can help you out. That said, we are here to listen about applying Silicon Valley's $1 billion product frameworks to empower our communities. The speaker taking us through this session, she is allow me, if you're on scared, you see the second name? Well, I come from one of the Kenyan tribes which have the biggest problem with the letter L and the letter R. So I'm not going to attempt. Yeah, so the tribe I come from, we have a big problem with the letter R and L, and her name has both, a lot of them. So kindly let me call her with her first name only. Help me in welcoming to the stage with the claps. Kindly help me welcome Dulce at the stage.
Hello, everyone. Let me see. Let's put the slides. I can start while you put the slides. Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Dulce Villarreal in English. Dulce Villarreal en español. I'm from Mexico City. I'm going to talk a little bit while my presentation is ready. But this is normal for us who are speakers. Like sometimes we have to talk without presentations, I guess. Well, I started my career as an economist, and suddenly I was in tech doing a lot of things with the startups. And I ended up being a product manager. For me, being a product manager means you serve others and you do everything to help your team, mostly developers or also engineers. A product manager is a person who works with the engineers, designers, business, legal, etc., etc. I've been working in Silicon Valley for a few years in banking in Mexico as a data product manager or as a product manager. And today I'm going to talk about product frameworks. Product frameworks allowed us to have clarity. As a team, sometimes we are in a meeting and we think all people are talking the same, but it's not true. We are not talking the same. And these product frameworks allowed us to have the same language, to be in the same tone of voice, basically. And I'm going to talk about specific product frameworks that Silicon Valley companies use. But since I arrived in Kenya, I thought it was going to be a better idea to use these product frameworks with companies from Africa. Then I did this presentation between yesterday and today with African companies, and I hope we can have it soon. The frameworks are personas. Somebody heard about personas here? Good. Jobs to be done? Perfect. Pre-mortem? Good, good. Pre-mortem is different from post-mortem. It's like you killed your startup, you launched your product. It's kind of that. Nothing? Okay. And design a sprint. Design a sprint, we are skip design a sprint because normally, just to explain it, really, really good, it takes at least 5 hours. And to do a design a sprint, it takes like for 2 weeks to 1 week. But hopefully we can have it soon, and I can present. Computer is there. It's just I really need the presentations because I just met the companies yesterday and today, and it would be very nice that you know the presentations. In the meantime, I'm gonna explain what I do in the Bitcoin space. Today, to this talk, I have my product management hat, but on the Bitcoin space, I was working in the crypto industry in Silicon Valley. I went to the HRF conference in Miami, and after listening to human rights activists, I decided to quit my crypto job and decide to launch Librería de Satoshi, or Satoshi Library, that is a Bitcoin education. Can we connect it or not? Oh. Okay, I launched Librería de Satoshi. That is a Bitcoin education initiative in Latin America. We make Bitcoin education accessible in Spanish in a very technical way. Well, we are not going to be able to present, and it's really, really sad, but we are going to start. Okay, this is a Windows. I didn't use a Windows in a long, long time. Yeah. Thank you. Femi told me this is the way in Africa that happened to him in the first African conference. I thought he was kidding, but I think it's normal. Okay, why we use product frameworks, like I was mentioned, is clarity, efficiency, and team alignment. But most important, we use product frameworks because we need to build products that people love. Like the Bitcoin protocol already works, like with high fees or not, but Bitcoin protocol works, Lightning works. But we need to still build real products that people love. Well, the frameworks we will cover today are personas, jobs to be done, pre-mortem, design sprint, and working backwards. Personas is a very interesting framework because it is being used for PayPal, for example, and they have a very interesting checking out system where they increase a lot their sales, so how people use it, the active users. But now we are going to use it for BitTrust Builder. Then what I prepared for today is a persona for BitTrust Builder, and I'm going to explain what is persona. Personas allow us to understand our customers deeply and their psychology. Basically, what we do before building a product, or what we should do before building a product, is talking with people, interview them, doing research, reading. That allowed us to build better products for them. And we have normally the early adopter or a persona that is going to be a representation of the person we want to target. When we build a product, we cannot build for the whole world. We have to build for a specific person that normally is the person that is going to adopt our product and the problem we are solving. In this case, we have Noah, the non-blockchain developer. Is somebody who already has experience coding, and it's a person we can target in BitTrust Builder specifically because their motivations are learning, freedom, creativity, and because he doesn't like his fiat job, it's a good person to target in BitTrust Builder. The next persona is Wanda. Wanda wants to be a blockchain developer, but she doesn't have experience, and maybe she can start in Data Bitcoin. And Data Bitcoin is a great institution for her to start her career in the Bitcoin space, and eventually she can go and come to BitTrust Builders. A negative persona is a person that we don't want to target. Let's say Christian from San Francisco, who is an Ethereum guy. It's outside of the target of BitTrust Builder. Jobs to be done. You cannot see the presentation, but it's a funny presentation about Twitter. And Twitter used to use jobs to be done before Elon Musk. And they use it so much that people say maybe we are reusing the framework so much. But actually, jobs to be done is really good because it allows you to think that your user is hiring you or hiring the product to solve a specific problem. The example that I bring you today is Tando. Have any of you used Tando here? Woo! Well, normally, if somebody's listening as stories, you say, as a persona, which you saw, when I am in a context that I want to get a job or hire a product to do a job, I get this motivation, then I get something or an outcome. This is real. I went to the restaurant 2 blocks from here, really delicious Kenyan authentic food, but they don't accept my credit card. But thankfully, somebody told me, dolo Tando, and I have Tando and my wallet. Then, as a first-time tourist in Kenya, when I'm dining in a restaurant that only accepts M-Pesa, I want and I can't pay easily without buying a local SIM card. As a tourist, I need to buy a SIM card. I don't know how, I don't know where. Then I have to do KYC. Then with Tando, I can pay easily without buying any local SIM card. So I'm able to enjoy my meal without any hassle, seamless. So I can enjoy my trip in Kenya and not thinking about setting up an M-Pesa account. That's something that is so beautiful. And Tando is everywhere. You cannot see on the screen, but you can send money, buy goods, and pay bills with Tando. And you can sync with any lining address. And it's pretty good. It sometimes doesn't work because reliability of the internet. You can try it with Phoenix. It really works very well. The next slide is pre-mortem. Pre-mortem normally we do a post-mortem. When somebody died, we say, why this person died? But we can do a pre-mortem, meaning we kill our startup or our project before we launch. This is one of my favorites, and we did an exercise in adopting Bitcoin, and we killed Bitcoin in 2140. It's very interesting, and if somebody wants to do a pre-mortem of their startup, I will be more than happy to do it with you during this space. A pre-mortem is a product framework that allowed us to see the risk before it happened. And one of the biggest companies in the United States that use pre-mortem is Stripe. Stripe is a fintech company and basically allows you to predict and prevent problems before it launches. One of the things that I like about pre-mortem is, as a Bitcoiner, it keeps you humble. There is no room for arrogance, and we learn from failure before it happens. Also, it creates a culture of openness and makes sure the team is on the same page. Also, in the metric size, people and companies who do pre-mortem increase success for more than 30%. And finally, it reduces overconfidence, and the most important, you might even stop problems before it happens. Pre-mortems are very similar that have in nuclear, thermic, or electricity plants. They have to have plans for everything that can be bad. It's kind of the Murphy law. If something can be bad, it will go bad. Then we will have a plan, and nothing is going to be bad. For example, a pre-mortem is a great exercise for Gridless or any mining company. The next one is design sprint, and as I mentioned, I'm going to skip that part because it's very, very long. So far, only Bleaks in the whole ecosystem with the Bitcoin design community have done a design sprint. My favorite one is working backwards. Working backwards is one of my favorite products because everybody can write a press release. Basically, as a product manager, you write a press release of your product before launching the product. And working backwards is very famous in Amazon. They use it in Amazon. And it's kind of, you celebrate where you are building before building it. And it's great because engineers can read it, product marketing, designers, everybody can see, and the company is aligned. While doing research, I was talking with Bernard from Bitnob, and I say, do you know working backwards? And Bernard say, yes, I actually like it. And I say, why you like it? And say, give me clarity. It's just so awesome, like just to sit down and write. Then if you don't know working backwards, I really incentivize to do it. We are like in the end. In the very, very end. And Yeah, this is one of my favorites. And normally in my last company, in the New York Stock Exchange, when we're doing the Lightning implementation, we did one. And it's easily, everyone can write a press release. And this is the idea. Before launching a product, you write the working backwards. It's next slide, please. And basically, this is what you do. There is a book I recommend it. There is podcast. It's really cool. Everybody can do it. The fact that these big companies or big tech does this or use this product framework doesn't mean our community cannot use these frameworks. Like these communities, like Bernard, Bitnob is using this. This is an example or working backwards from Bernard and Bitnob. He wrote an article about Bitnob became the first African company integrating UMA. And I choose it because two reasons. It's very fresh, and the next panel is about specifically this. Bernard is going to be talking about this topic with the people from Lightspark. I think this is something we can do, and nowadays, maybe even with ChatGPT, it doesn't take so much. You don't need a whole team. As a solo entrepreneur, these frameworks allows you to have clarity, efficiency. It's so great to do it. And I swear that Bitcoin works. Bitcoin fixes a lot of problems, but we need to build products that fix people problems every single day. Then, why I wanted to talk about this, I think sharing a little bit of my passion for product management and for building products that people love is very important. You don't need to be a product manager to have a product mindset. You can be an engineer with a good product mindset, actually. That's me. Thank you. And if you want to learn more about product frameworks, or you want to do an exercise or a workshop with your company, I will be more than happy to do it. I've been doing this for the past 10 years. And thank you so much for the invitation to the Bitcoin African Conference.
We apologize for that, but thank you for being very graceful through your presentation. We have a bit of an announcement from Amiti.
Hey, I forgot to mention, so I just wanted to add, we are hosting a Privacy Jenga workshop here tomorrow. So you get to actually knock over blocks, talk about Bitcoin privacy leaks, and engage, and so it's going to be really fun. Come check it out. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's not take any more time because these speakers have already been introduced by the previous speaker. So they're here to talk about UMA, transforming cross-border payments. Kindly help me in welcoming to the stage again. And please, this time, the timing cannot be African. Thank you. Help me welcome in the CEO of Bitnob, Bernard Parra, and the VP of Product at Lightspark, Nicolas Cabrera. Kindly welcome them better, guys.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here. My name is Nicolas Cabrera. I'm heading the product team at Lightspark, and super excited to have Bernard as well on stage. We have some exciting news for everyone, some real use cases on how can we make money move more efficiently on the internet. And the good thing is we don't have any slides, so we can go and move straight in. So as I said, I'm from Lightspark. Lightspark's been a company founded about 2.5 years ago out of the US with a global intent to help bringing Bitcoin-based infrastructure to help money move more efficiently online. We know how broken moving money today is. And we have, great partners like Bernard at BitNob and others that really help bringing money movement more efficient to their customers, but they still rely on infrastructure, on a set of open protocol that will make it easy for any entities, any businesses, any individuals to send money from one wallet to another. Right now, we know it's money has border. Yeah, I live in the US. I'm French originally. I spent a bit of time in Africa, previously in Australia as well, and moving money from euro in Europe to any currency in Africa, to Australian dollars or to the US, very broken. And that's what we're doing at Lightspark. We announced this universal money address called UMA, which is an open protocol that helps creating compatibility between fragmented systems. So if you want to send money from, let's say, the US, you want to send from your US bank accounts in US dollars, and I want to send it to Bernard here, let's say in Kenya. Today, the currency exchange, the lack of compatibility between my bank accounts in the US and let's say even BitNob or any wallets here in Kenya will really prevent me to have a great experience. It will make it very complicated, slow, and super expensive. That's where UMA and the Lightning Network help addressing exactly those problems. And can't wait for you to hear some of the use case and the great solutions that on top of this infrastructure, on top of UMA, Bernard and the team at BitNob been able to launch. But what is UMA? It's really helping extending the Lightning addresses that some of you, I'm sure, using in your wallets, and then addressing some travel rules, some compliance, some FX needs that all of your organizations, wallets, bank accounts, will need to be able to efficiently adopt and acquire a user and allow them to send money with all the right regulatory requirements, in that local region, securely and safely. So really encourage all of you to learn more about UMA. We're going to learn about specific use cases about that. We're also announcing today that another one of our partners, Yellow Card, also going to integrate UMA in the Lightning Network and offer that to about 20 countries, businesses, individuals in Africa. What we're here to do at Lightspark, we are a B2B business, really enabling great partners like Yellow Card, like BitNob and others, to help making money move across any region, any countries in Africa. We're really big in LATAM as well. We're working with partners like Nubank, like Bitso, like Ripio, in Argentina, in Brazil, in Mexico. We have a few partners in the US, like Coinbase, one of the largest exchange, in the world. Partners in Europe. So it's a really global network, more than 300 million UMA-enabled users at the end of this year. So you become very significant network. Those 300 million UMA-enabled users, they're all users that can send to you, any of you in Africa, or receive from you in whatever currencies that your wallet, your bank accounts already support. We're just facilitating with Bitcoin and Lightning in the background those money movements. So maybe, Bernard, you can share with us some of the use cases and solutions that you bring and what UMA enable and facilitates for your customers.
I mean, I was enjoying everything you're saying about it and just, visualizing what the future looks like. So, I mean, obviously the problem is clear, right? What we've been able to do working with Lightspark is, so there are two sides to payments, right? There's the side, of course, you can, send and receive payments, but then the UX is important, right? One of the things when you're dealing with, say, Bitcoin stuff is like, hey, maybe this address is complex, right? But things like emails are easily readable, right? So if my email is with bernard@bitnob.com, then maybe we put a $sign in front of it. Any wallet that integrates that knows that that payment is going to come to me. Now, what it does is that a company in the US, for example, who has integrated UMA doesn't need to. So I don't need to send my account number to you. Like, okay, I want to send money to you. Then you don't need my account number. All you need is that address. The same way you need my email address. So what we've done is we've integrated the protocol. Thankfully, in 2021, we did the first Lightning integration on the continent as well. A year after we integrated Lightning address, so when UMA came, it solved some of the problems with it, which was the compliance side, because whether you like it or not, when it comes to payments, different regions have different forms of regulation, right? So this makes it comfortable for companies like, the Coinbase, the new banks, to say, hey, you know what, we can do this because we have compliance requirements to fulfill. So I think that's one of the really key things that makes everyone comfortable. So at the end of it, what we have live today on the app on UMA is that you're able to send money to someone in Argentina, for example, right? You're able to send, even if it's just $1, you can send $1 to someone in Argentina. You can send $1 to someone in Brazil, using Ripio. You can send the same thing to someone in Philippines, for example, through Pouch. And then, we tested the US as well with Backed. So, and then it just keeps increasing. The moment Nubank, for example, is live on the network, it means that every Nubank customer in Brazil can instantly send money to any other, country that BitNub or a BitNub user can do. And, just so the UX is really a key thing, and I think that's good what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about the open nature of UMA. And, I think we're all convinced why we all love Bitcoin is about these interoperable payment solutions, yeah? And bringing this freedom that whatever country you're in, whatever currency you want to send or receive, whatever wallet you're actually using for it, you should be able to send and receive money to any of your friends or family or any businesses that you want to. I know there's been the vision from day one, with Bitcoin. It's very exciting to start seeing that coming to life, with the number of partners we have on the network. More than 40 partners now globally, large and smaller partners that can enable you to send to or, receive from all of those partners, with more than 300 million users already of UMA. And the network is fastly growing, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think the other thing is one way to think about it is that it's not a competition, right? It's network. The game here is network effects. So if you're building a product, you have your own small app in your town. You have even just 1,000 customers, 5,000 customers. You're just growing. I think it's one of those things that you can try to integrate from day one. What it gives you is instant interoperability with other companies. So the question I'll ask you is, if you're here in Nairobi, for example, and you're building an app and you want to do cross-border payments to Brazil, for example, who do you know at Nubank that you will call and say, hey, I want to make payments through you? And so the cost, right? So it needs to be really costly to do these things. But then what this does is that it reduces the cost, the barrier to entry, and just, running experiments on the network, and that's key.
And that's really what we're here to help at Lightspark. We're behind the scene, building those protocols, bringing those partners in the network, enabling them to light up UMA to their customers. And the way it works, to your example about maybe sending money from, let's say, the US to Kenya, we have our UMA-enabled partners in the US that will initiate a transaction, sending, let's say, $50 to someone in Kenya. They will send to that money address, $, Bernard at BitNode, for example. And they don't need to create any partnership, with their local wallets. They don't need to send some liquidity and dealing with that complexity of cross-border money movement. All of that is covered by the messaging layer that UMA allow between the sending institution in the US with a receiving institution, in this case BitNub, in Kenya. And, USD will travel, get converted into sats, into Bitcoin, gets here in sats, and stays in sats if the receiver wants to, receive and hold Bitcoin, or convert that back to any local currency as the off-ramp. So from on-ramp in the US, instantly getting received and sent to any endpoint in Kenya based on Lightning, Bitcoin, and UMA. Sounds very magical, but partners like BitNub actually have that live today in production, which is really exciting and super magical to actually see it working.
Yep.
So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what the future can be for payments, and the future is actually here now. If you go to uma.me website, you can read more about it, understand in more details how the UMA protocol works. Please come and talk to me at the end as well, or Bernard. We can tell you a bit more how you can join the network, how can we help you across multiple countries, multiple partners. We also have some funding and marketing incentives that we provide to partners to join the network. That's why we're excited to sponsor these events, to meet all of you. And we have our CTO as well, Kevin, who's going to do a talk tomorrow at 11:45. So I will really encourage all of you to join that. He's going to go into more details on how that works and how we support as well stablecoins and other use cases along the way. Excited to be here, excited to meet you all, and have a good conference. Thank you.
Guys, with 5 minutes to spare, I think Bernard has redeemed himself. Please appreciate him. He spared us more time, so he has redeemed himself. That said, this is the last keynote speaker of the day, okay? The last keynote speaker of the day. So we need to give her energy as she closes ABC 2024. Last keynote speaker, that's what we're going to call her. So as she closes this session of keynote speakers, she is here to talk to us about financial freedom in the 21st century, and she has evidence from 25 countries. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Ella Hugh, who is they're already clapping, who is a senior at Cornell University.
ABC team, do you all have a clicker by chance? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Ella Huff, and I am a junior fellow at the Cornell Brooks Tech Policy Institute, and I am also in my final year at Cornell studying the first undergraduate independent major program on Bitcoin. And unfortunately, I am not Professor Sarah Krebs, who I'm sure you all were expecting to see. She was very hoping to be with you all. Unfortunately, the airlines had other plans. But I am very fortunate to be able to work with her on this study, the first of its kind, looking at the global adoption of Bitcoin across 25 countries, supported by the Human Rights Foundation and the Reynolds Foundation. And I hope to do her presentation justice today, and I very much hope that you all will get to meet her to share just a little sliver of her accomplishments. She is a permanent member on the Council of Foreign Relations. She's written 7 books, and she was also an active officer in the U.S. Air Force, so she's truly incredible. As many of you may or may not be familiar with, for many years, Chainalysis has done a crypto adoption index. However, no one has ever looked at specifically just Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is or is not being used as a tool for financial freedom around the world. And this study aims to serve as a baseline of understanding, looking at who uses Bitcoin and why they use it. Conventional wisdom holds that Bitcoin is a speculative investment. But this is a developed world bias, as high-income countries have greater disposable income available for savings and investment, spending 13% versus 56% on necessities such as food. However, as a study entails, we've structured our research to go past assumptions and go layers deep below the surface, diving into the nuance. To begin, our research is designed with 2 parts. A quantitative and qualitative part. The quantitative component is the largest ever of its kind, surveying 25,000 individuals across 25 countries. And the quantitative component aims to provide contextual information to build a story around the data and ensure we are better capturing the nuance. And here's our team. we have brought 13 students from the Cornell Bitcoin Club to support these efforts. And this club is a part of a larger organization called the Bitcoin Students Network, which I co-founded with Arshmalu, who also works at the Human Rights Foundation, to really support students in learning about Bitcoin across 65 countries. And so these 13 students, a part of the Cornell node of this network, are each assigned 5 different countries to better see regional insights that might arise. And they come from all majors, grades, and interests across the school. And this is a little bit of how our process looks to best do the quantitative component and perform these interviews. So we really try to lean into the peer-to-peer nature of Bitcoin to better reflect the very values of Bitcoin and financial freedom that the study is about, and better bring privacy, trust, and connection to the forefront. Now you might wonder, how did you go about choosing the 25 countries that you've chosen? Which include democracies, non-democracies, cover all major continents, religions, sizes, and stages of development. And the answer is that Professor Krebs, Kreiner, and Flores scored 178 countries off of 18 factors of interest, covering inflation rates, to banking access, to prevalence of remittances, to legal status, corruption, civil unrest. And then, when constructing the survey to be used, we looked at 15 different categories of individual level attitudes, from their awareness of Bitcoin versus cryptocurrencies, perceived riskiness that they might have towards Bitcoin, their motivations for using Bitcoin, their trust in the financial system and Bitcoin, and their financial knowledge. Currently, we have the preliminary results back from the United States, which I will share a bit with you today. To begin, Bitcoin awareness is considerable at 84%, which notably is 8 points greater than that of crypto. However, ownership is still fairly limited. And as you can see from the middle chart, there is still considerable room for education, given a low knowledge of about 21% versus 23% for cryptocurrencies. And about a third believe that Bitcoin will be the main form of payment within the next 50 years. Next, we see that ownership is highest among men that have a high income and are in the millennial age range. And notably, this aligns well with results from Professor Troy Cross, which he found earlier this year in the Nakamoto Project report, Understanding Bitcoin Adoption in the United States. Finally, in terms of risk, from this chart you can see that Bitcoin is perceived as not terribly riskier than foreign currencies, corporate bonds, and stocks, but much riskier than the US dollar, gold, or real estate. So now this is a 2-year study, and over the course of this year and next year, we will continue to receive data from the other 24 countries, which Kenya is one of the countries, which will allow greater country-level and regional-level comparisons. And next year, we hope that our work will be beneficial for increasing shared understanding, especially amongst policymakers, of the factors driving Bitcoin adoption, usage patterns, and the broader implications for financial inclusion and technological innovation. And we very much look forward to sharing that information with you all. And if I may give you all one next step, please do look up Sarah Krebs and the work that she does. She's also a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute and has written some great reports. Thank you all very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Guys, that was sweet, and that was short, and that was really, really well done. Appreciate Ella one more time. Well, that is how to close that session now. Wow. There was conflict. Okay. We have things are falling from up here. I'm a bit worried. Are we safe? Are we okay? You were good? Okay, okay. We have the net. Are you all on your scared app? I'll keep asking because tomorrow you'll have it easy if you have the app. Some of you still don't know what I'm talking about. Were you able to download it? You're able to? So, you know, we have 2 more sessions and we can close the day. Just 2 more sessions, 2 panels, and we close today. They are here to talk about cultivating a thriving Bitcoin developer community. strategies for success. The moderator, I cannot see him. Are they all here? They're all here. I see one of them. So I'm just going to ask, are we all here? He is a board member and interim CEO at BitTrust. I do not, oh, I see him now. Okay, I see him now. So the moderator of this panel, kindly help me welcome to the stage, Mr. Abubakar, and he's going to help us introduce the team. Yes, just come. Kindly appreciate him as he comes up here. Hi.
Sure. Is Stephanie around though? Good evening, good evening, everyone. Stephanie's actually moderating, so I'll hand it over to her.
That's fine. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you for joining us today. So we're having a short panel on cultivating a thriving Bitcoin developer community. So we're going to be talking about some strategies for success. Since we didn't have a chance to introduce the panelists, I will be asking the first question. If you can tell us a bit about you, what you do, and what you're looking forward to sharing today.
Yes, my name is Lamar Wilson. I am founder of Black Bitcoin Billionaire. I'm a software developer and just a Bitcoiner for a very long time. So I'm happy to be here for sure.
Thank you, Lamar. Abubakar?
Yeah, good evening, guys. My name is Abubakar Nur Khalil. I'm the CEO of Recursive Capital. It's an early-stage Bitcoin VC. We invest in really early-stage companies, specifically in Africa. We invested in companies like BitNow, for example. On that, I'm also the interim CEO and board member of BitTrust, where we're a not-for-profit that essentially decentralized Bitcoin development in Africa and other regions that are similar, like Latin America. On that, I also work on Bitcoin Core, mostly PR reviews. And beyond that, I write for Forbes, essentially cataloging the evolution of Bitcoin development in Africa, I do special reports and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tobi Ojolakbe. I'm a software engineer and an open source Bitcoin contributor to projects like Albi. I'm also a technical writer for Bitcoin-related articles for like whatisbitcoin.com. And I'm also the co-founder of a startup called Views, which is an open source platform that's trying to decentralize how ads and content are being distributed across Africa. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So building on the aim of the panel, which is building thriving Bitcoin developer communities, Lamar, since you've built some Bitcoin communities like Coinda and Black Bitcoin Billionaire, so what would you say are the key elements to fostering inclusivity and engagement within these communities?
I think the biggest thing that you have to do when you have community is you have to have a very strong idea. I think ideas gather people together. I think ideas keep people together, and I think ideas actually move people forward. And I think Bitcoin is one of those ideas, and I think developing for Bitcoin is a very, very important idea. What got me into developing is I saw the white paper, and the only way I could understand Bitcoin at the time, it was not a lot about it back then, is to build something. So I built one of the first wallets for Bitcoin, and I think building things for Bitcoin actually make you a lot stronger in it, and also allow you to know more about it and teach you more so that you can go educate people and build communities around that idea.
Thank you. Abubakar, what is BitTrust's perspective on that? So how has BitTrust built an inclusive environment for developers to thrive in Africa and the Global South?
Yeah, sure. So what we kind of focused on was three key elements. So first of all is the community, which is essentially the backbone of everything. So this is essentially where we get the pipeline for our grants. This is essentially where we get all the people who have gone through at least some form of training into Bitcoin, specifically looking at either doing master in Bitcoin that we used to do a while back, as well as things like
developers that just want to be engaged from the perspective of going from general development all the way up to being Bitcoin developers. The last angle that we have, which I think is very interesting, is on the B-Trust Builder side. Because another aspect to look at it is, now that we have this community of developers that are kind of sensitized about Bitcoin and want to get involved, there needs to be some sort of mechanism to get them from zero to hero and specialize within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And B-Trust Builders has ended up becoming this sort of, I guess, global template that people can kind of look to exactly understand exactly how you train developers from just understanding that Bitcoin exists to actually working productively in the Bitcoin ecosystem. The last aspect, I think, which is important for their sustainability as career developers, is to make sure that they're part of the community, get through B-Trust Builders, and then at the end of the day, they're paired to grants, whether it's starter grants, to make sure that they have some sort of exploratory phase where they focus in and narrow into a niche in the Bitcoin open source space, all the way up to getting long-term grants, which is more focused on developers that are most likely contributing at a year-long level. At that point, they already have some sort of specialization. So I'd say those three key elements is kind of how we've navigated the space and built the sort of rock-solid template for everyone else to follow.
Thank you. Toby, since you were a B-Trust builder, or you are a B-Trust builder, so you have benefited from some of these elements that Abubakar has mentioned. How would you say that has shaped your journey into being a founder of yours?
Okay, it's been a very interesting journey. I got first exposed to Bitcoin in my third year at university. You know, just speculatively, I bought 50,000 naira worth of Bitcoin. And within a month, the price had increased by 100%. So I was quite interested, like, what technology is behind this, right? And for most people from Nigeria, like my age range, that was the experience for them. They came from the investor mindset of, how can I make quick cash? But looking back at, thinking around the technologies behind it, right? I became very fascinated by, when I read Bitcoin white paper, I became very fascinated by what were the philosophies behind this technology, how it is trying to facilitate peer-to-peer transactions online. And it was not until 2021 when I was doing a postgraduate degree at the Nigerian University of Technology and Management. Femi Alunge was actually my lecturer then. When I got to know about, the Bitcoin, the B-Trust Builders program, which was called Kala then, and I, joined the program. And within the period of, being a part of the program, we learned a lot about how Bitcoin works, what the Lightning Network is. We did a lot of seminars, workshops, mastering Bitcoin, mastering Lightning, which really opened my eyes up to what the technology was. And in terms of shaping my career, I would say a lot of the philosophies that govern Bitcoin, like philosophies like don't trust, verify, and some of the game theoretical concepts that govern how the Lightning Network works, have increased my interest and passion for building censorship resistant and secure technologies that are focused on, giving more control and yet privacy to users. So, yeah.
Thank you. So based on all your answers so far, a key part of building a thriving community is education. So Lamar, I'll go back to you. As someone that has taught Bitcoin programming globally, what is your perspective on making technical Bitcoin education accessible to developers?
I think the biggest thing is to meet people where they are. I've taught Bitcoin programming. I see one of my students that came from Kenya all the way over to the U.S. to take the class. And I think making sure that you fit. And the great thing about Bitcoin is because it is a protocol, it is written in many different languages, and people can pick it up, whether it's Python, Rust, Go. They can pick it up and start to learn from that perspective. And I think that's extremely important that we continue to have people that build these tools in different languages and to allow people to get in where they fit in, so to speak. I think that really helps to push the understanding a lot more. So I really think that there are some people who might be, and that's another thing, I think there are some people who might be front-end developers. I met a guy today who works with Chain Code, and he's a front-end developer, built a dope game in the front, a nice game, excuse me, in the front end. And I think even getting those types of people involved also will help, because those people can become, more traditional core developers as we move forward, just because they have access to it and are learning from a different perspective. So,
okay, Abubakar, this question is to you. So, how can Bitcoin communities such as B-Trust Builders actually bridge the gap between developers, educators, and investors to create an ecosystem that is collaborative and actually drive innovation?
That's definitely I'll try and give as succinct an answer as I can, but thinking through this thought process, you're kind of balancing out three things, right? So the first thing is to primarily understand what part of the pipeline you operate as an organization. So if you're looking at it from the VC angle, typically what you're looking at is kind of the top of the funnel, I guess the output of all the work from the open source space, specifically looking at those that are building things that would likely either have a use case in the future or are working towards a use case, a business case actually. And with regards to folks like BTrust, where we draw the line is to make sure that we're not funding things at that stage of the pipeline and strictly left for those that are seeking more venture side returns and really focusing on trying to drive some sort of value proposition on the user level as opposed to more generally as like a public good. So I say on the folks on the non-for-profit side with regards to BTrust is our main focus is to ensure that we're supporting the critical infrastructure that underlines everything else, and that happens to be open source. So the main critical thing for us is making sure that there are existing structures all across that individual developers can get to at any point in the pipeline. So we're talking about people that are really, really early in terms of maybe not even know how to code, finding a mechanism for them to get involved to become coders, and then once they are able to code, you're able to have other structures that can accommodate for that. So whether it's BTrust Builder specifically, with especially our program coming in January to make sure that these developers have a mechanism for them to go from not exactly understanding how to contribute meaningfully to understanding what the ecosystem is all about, specifically the open source ecosystem, getting onto a stage where they can actually contribute meaningfully. That could be in the form of teaching other people, it could be in the form of opening pull requests, it could be in the form of even reviewing pull requests. And then I say the last component is really understanding where the middle ground is between the two, because it's sort of a push and pull thing. We have the opportunity to kind of catalyze the ecosystem in the open source side, but that also has consequences on the venture side and vice versa. So we have a situation where we could have companies that we eventually invest in that end up doing products that are open source based, and then it kind of goes back into the flywheel to see how that could be collaborated essentially. So I say it's like working on synergies and making sure that you don't step on other toes and making sure that it's more of a collaborative thing to ensure that there's some sort of synergy at the end.
Okay, so if you want to explore the venture side of things, how will you say like venture capital and some of these funding mechanisms are actually helping to sustain these developer communities?
Yeah, it does so, but in a different context. So for developers in the open source space, the main sustainable method for them to operate as developers and have careers is through grants, which is why BTrust specifically focuses on bringing it into two. So one is the starter grants to make sure that they actually get like a focus, and then the long-term grant comes in at like a year, 2 years. And I say where the venture angle comes in is not every developer is looking to work on protocol level stuff. So you have a situation where you have a critical mass of developers that want to meaningfully contribute to Bitcoin. So what do? You bucket them into two essentially. So one works essentially for the good of everyone else, which is the open source side. And on the venture side, you have to have some sort of accommodation for them to start building really early to get supported. So in the same light, Recursive Capital, for example, our approach is to bucket out investments into two, similar to how BTrust operates. So it's not a case where we directly look for really, really good companies that are at a stage where they're readily investable. We also look for the more green early stage companies that were able to sustain this sort of flywheel effect to make sure that all the people that are really building early have some sort of mechanism to get to the point where they're really investable. So I say looking at it from those two angles is the kind of way where you can accommodate developers that are looking to build at different levels of the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yes, thank you. Talking about building on different levels of the ecosystem, Toby. So being the co-founder of Views, how do you see platforms like Views supporting African creators?
Okay, I think that's a very good question. Just as a form of a recap, before I actually joined the BTrust Builders Program as a fellow, I was actually working on a startup of my own, which was called Tel. And basically what Tel was doing was to build out digital tools to enable African creators to monetize their creativity. Yeah. In terms of building that solution, there were a lot of challenges that I faced. One of which was, monetizing and ensuring that payments are being able to be processed across different African countries. Because right now, it's very difficult. If you are selling stuff in Nigeria, it's difficult to, receive payments from somewhere like Burundi or Kenya, right, for products that you sell as a creative. So those are the problems we're trying to solve. And in terms of building for that problem, I discovered that Bitcoin, right, was one way we could really build out a solution that really unites Africa. Because we understand that, okay, Europe, for instance, most countries in Europe accept the euro as a currency, And that is like a legal tender that is accepted. But Africa, even though we are very united and connected, we've not still been able to really find a unifying currency. And I personally believe that Bitcoin could be that currency that unites Africa and connects Africa to the rest of the world. So a lot of the things that I've been able to do and a lot of problems that we've been trying to solve with my startup, mentorship has played a key role in enabling us to know exactly what is the important thing to build, what are the next steps to take. One of those organizations that have actually provided us with mentorship is CC Hub, right, which is currently being led by Ojoma, who is a member of the Bitrust board. We were part of their first cohort of Createch founders, so we were able to like get a lot of learnings and mentorship from there. And then in terms of the technical aspect of like building Bitcoin-related solutions, the fact that I still am actually a fellow of the Bitrust Builders program, provided me with a lot of really hands-on technical experience on how to contribute to open source projects and also really understand the ethos and philosophies that govern how Bitcoin and the Lightning Network works.
Okay, thank you so much. We're short on time, so we're rounding up. Final question in 30 seconds. What advice will you give to the developers that actually want to grow themselves, how to find communities to join, and how to actually contribute to these communities?
I think it's extremely important to, there's a guy that teaches karate at the local community center, and he always says, old men are for wisdom and young men are for war. And I think one of the things that we need to start to do is embrace the whole community. So there may be older people who are developers who have disciplines who are in disciplines like cryptography. I was listening to the doctor speak this morning, and I think it's time to make sure that we start opening it up to everyone, because it's not just about Bitcoin, and also to encourage people who have ideas, like my buddies over in Nigeria that are doing MavaPay. Right? Encourage those people to continue to keep pushing and trying to make things different and better, and trying to use the coin and just the system in a way that we may not have seen before. So I think it's important that we open the entire community up. We don't try to narrow it down and tell people what they can and cannot do, and allow innovation to continue to thrive and grow just from the thought of having new and brighter ideas. So I think that's extremely important to keep the community thriving and move towards success.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short. I mean, the main thing I would say is, especially, this is something I found useful personally, navigating the space as a developer, is you honestly have to keep constantly challenging yourself. This is a fast-moving ecosystem, and a lot of the times you might get into the habit of learning something new and then feeling like you really, really know it, and then you get to a point where the moment you feel that sort of, overconfidence is the moment that should trigger you to realize that you need to do some more research and some more learning. So I say, honestly, just stay hungry, stay focused, especially. There are a lot of distractions that could easily come into your way as a career or really as a developer, especially really early and really young. So I say stay focused, stay hungry, constantly keep challenging yourself, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's essentially the state that you're going to be in throughout your open source developer.
Okay, my advice, if I was to give this advice to myself, the first one I would say is stay curious, right? I think it was curiosity that led me to Bitcoin, right? So it's very essential to continue to find as much information as possible about the things you're interested in. The second advice I would give is to find your community. I would say that, there are a lot of things you can learn on your own, right? But if you are able to find people who share the same interest as you and are also looking at increasing their own knowledge and skills in that particular interest, it would be very nice for you to, have sessions with them, which was one of the things that, being a part of the Bitrust Builders program really helped me with. And then the final thing I would say is, explore your interests, right? So in terms of being a Bitcoin open source contributor to projects like Albi, I was able to sort of key in my passion for the creator economy in Africa by looking at how, Albi, for instance, was building things that are related to enabling people to connect to protocols like Nostr, Plebstar, which I was very passionate in, considering my background in building creator-based products. So I would say that, there are always ways you could increase your passion and excitement about something, especially when you are connecting that new concept or new passion with something you've been interested in before. So I think those are just going to be my advice to anyone interested.
Okay, thank you all. On that note, I will say thank you all for speaking and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Good evening again, guys. So this panel is essentially on the power of open source in shaping the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I have with me Connor Okas, I have Carla, I have Jonas. So just to begin, I'd like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and let you guys know exactly what part of the ecosystem they work on, and just give you at least some context before we get in.
Hello. Oh, welcome.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Yeah, mic check 1, 2, we're recording. How's everyone doing? My name's Connor. I'm an open source product manager at Spiral. Spiral is an initiative at Block that supports open source developers, designers, and some PMs. We support a wide array of Bitcoin projects, everything from Bitcoin Core to software development kits like BDK and LDK and BTC Pay Server and mining solutions like Stratum V2. So yeah, happy to talk about open source Bitcoin today.
Hi everyone, I'm Carla. I work on open source Lightning protocol development at Chain Labs with Jonas. And I am a founding member of the B-Trust board where I'm involved with developer education and onboarding folks to open source.
And I am Jonas. I work for Carla at Chaincode and also work on other educational initiatives and generally just try to help out where needed.
Great. So generally, I'd like us to at least walk through some important angles of the Bitcoin open source ecosystem, specifically for one, those that are interested in the space on the developer side. Two, those that are just looking for at least a general holistic overview of exactly how all these parts fit. And lastly, for those who honestly have been sort of confused at exactly where everything is or how it's placed and kind of how it all goes through. So just starting with you, Connor, given the work that you do at Spiral, how have you seen the most effective way to get new developers to start working in open source, given the fact that there's so many differences compared to traditional engineering?
So, like the best ways to encourage developers?
Yeah.
I think programs like what Chaincode do, like educational programs, are like a good way to help developers develop a strong Bitcoin ethos. At Spiral, when we're looking to give grants to people, we're looking for people who can, differentiate why Bitcoin's unique as compared to the rest of the crypto ecosystem. I think one of the best ways to get developers involved is just to encourage them to contribute. I think there tends to be like a fear of, open source and not wanting to just kind of dive head first and get your hands dirty. But I think if you can prove that you can get real valuable work done, work in the open and collaborate with different types of people in the open, develop some proof of work over some period of time, it sets you up nicely to, leverage that work to, get support to extend that work over a longer period of time. So I just, we have a lot of material and a lot of historical records that can help get you up to speed about why certain decisions have been made and the thinking behind certain features or new capabilities for the protocol. But I think, just getting your hands dirty and coming with an attitude of service, is very important. So yeah, that's what I'd say on that.
I think to add to that, there are two things maybe as folks involved in onboarding and education that we can always do a better job at. The first is really, I don't want to use the word marketing because that's kind of got a lot of bad connotations, but getting the message to talented developers that there is so much in Bitcoin that is interesting and exciting to work on, because often it seems very unfriendly, it seems, boring, it seems slow moving compared to all of the other things out there in the general cryptocurrency ecosystem. But I think that when you give people the right hooks to get interested with it, there's almost nothing in the computer science textbook that isn't covered in Bitcoin. It's networking, it's cryptography, it's distributed systems. There's so much to get excited about and so much work that needs to be done. It's just not necessarily apparent when you approach it from Twitter or from the outside, or you see the GitHub repo. And I think that that's like a very key point in getting people into Bitcoin development that we maybe don't talk about, because it's not easy to put in a 1, 2, 3 step in an education program. But open source Bitcoin development is really difficult. It's challenging and rewarding in many ways, but I don't think you'll really be successful if you don't find something to be excited by or interested in. So making that information more available to people, I think, is a great way to kind of get them to onboard themselves, rather than us saying, hey, look at this Bitcoin thing, it's interesting, because maybe that will chase people away, rather than giving them specific problems and hooks that they will find independently interesting.
So I think we've done a pretty poor job of articulating why Bitcoin open source is an interesting path. Bitcoin open source provides professional freedom. It provides about as good a meritocracy as you're going to find. It provides impact. You get to work on things that are used by lots of people, and it can change people's lives. And as Carla said, we also have the most and like best problems, like the best problem set you can find. So I think we need to be clear about what the benefits are. And I think we are generally terrible as a community reaching out to people at the top of the funnel. I think more is better. We have Ella and Arsh who are doing the Bitcoin Student Network. We have BitShala here that are sort of like geographically located people that are trying to provide community. We have Btrust now. So we're trending in the right direction, but I don't think generally as a community we're particularly articulate as to what do you get out of this and why is this like a compelling path.
And that's a perfect segue, which brings me to my next question that a lot of developers honestly either ask or reach out, or it's kind of the main thing that they're confronted with, which is what exactly is the benefit to them and why should they be involved in the Bitcoin open source space? And honestly, what is the great takeaway for them in terms of personally as well as just their space in humanity, I guess?
Well, I just gave you 4 reasons. I think, I mean, my talk tomorrow is about this. So if you were interested in this subject, come and hear 15 more minutes about this. Otherwise, I'll save it.
Yeah, no, I was literally going to plug your talk, you know. I don't know, maybe speaking from experience, you get to work from anywhere in the world at your own intensity for the most part. You're working on, in my opinion, probably the #1 most impactful project in the world. You get to be amongst some of the smartest people in the world who have a real dedication to their craftsmanship. You're solving some of the biggest computer science problems. You're incentivized to, to save in Bitcoin as well. So there's some, financial incentive as well. So I'd say some of those.
Just adding one thing from my own experience. I worked a bit in startups before I transitioned to Bitcoin open source. And I think something that's really rare in Bitcoin is that you get to decide how fast and how thoroughly you need to do things. You'll often, in a software engineering environment, find yourself in a situation where there's a ticket, there's a product manager, there's a customer, things have to go out within the next week, within the next day, and you don't get the opportunity to always, sort of develop that depth of understanding for yourself. Sometimes you just have to do things, even when you're on rocky footing of how the theory of it works. And I've found in my own experience and from the more successful Bitcoin open source developers that I know, taking the time to understand when you have to stop coding and learn a little bit more for yourself, and when it's actually appropriate for you to continue coding with the knowledge that you have. You get a lot of opportunity to build out skills and knowledge that just isn't available to you in a sort of fast-paced, typical engineering environment. And I think that's really valuable, and it's part of what makes the work so good, is that you're told that the job of engineering is always learning, but when this is your job, you actually get to always learn instead of just always push and hope the learning will come afterwards.
Yeah, can I just jump in with the ways that this is hard? Because it is really hard, and it's not for everybody, and I think we need to be clear about that, that there are people in the world that just need structure, and corporate structure isn't really good at incentivizing people to like do the next incrementally hard thing and reach for the next incremental promotion and get the next incremental title change and incremental raise, and like that mechanism has been refined over a long time, and it's very effective. There is no such thing as a senior Bitcoin open source developer. You're just doing it or you're not. And I think, as a ecosystem, we don't do an amazing job of differentiating, like if you're relatively new but providing value versus you've been doing this for a long time and providing value. We don't recognize that gap particularly well. So it's really like you have to have some intrinsic motivation as to why you are doing this. And that why, I think, is incredibly useful for your own life. Like, why do I make these choices? What is driving me? And if it's not to get like the next raise, then you really have to understand yourself to know what you're going for. And open source really provides that for you in a way that I think startups or big tech won't.
Perfect. And looking at the broader ecosystem and the place of funding organizations, whether Spiral, B-Trust, or even Chainco to a certain extent, I'd like to know your thoughts individually with how you look at us in the ecosystem creating sustainable funding models, given how different open source is compared to like conventional engineering, and what are the most effective strategies you've seen adopted by organizations, and what are some that haven't necessarily yielded as much positive benefit to the space?
Hard question. I'll go first. I think that this is an open question in Bitcoin because we all have this sort of long-term goal that Bitcoin will take off and Bitcoin businesses will make money and they will recognize the value in open source and that money will eventually flow back into open source, right? That's sort of the dream that we see in the future, but it's definitely not the reality today. I think up until sort of the last 2 or 3 years, the majority of Bitcoin work was funded by exchanges that make a lot of their money off the other coins. And that's just sort of been the reality of how we were funded up until a few years ago. So right now where we are is we're sort of fortunate to have, maybe 10 sources of funding in the whole ecosystem. And it is a really fragile position that we're in. I think Steve at Spiral has a good point of trying to diversify the funding that we have. So thinking about an organization like B-Trust, where we have a lump sum of money, if we think strategically and think, where can we give that money to BitShala, to Library of Satoshi, to decentralize what we have, so at least the decision-making isn't totally centralized and it'll be more locally relevant. But as for like decentralizing the sources of funding, I really don't think that we have an answer, and it's a real fragile point in Bitcoin open source.
Yeah, I agree. And what's worse is as price goes up, you see very little change in who's giving. So there's like no mind shift of this sort of altruistic giving that makes all of this work. And that's unsettling. I think Bitcoiners traditionally are not great at spending their Bitcoin. Like there's this HODL meme has gotten a little crazy, where you're just unwilling to part with any of your Satoshis because, you never know. Like if it goes to 1 million, like, I'm going to always regret buying socks. But like, we're in the here and now, and we need to build a bridge to that future. That future essentially is being held up by, in my opinion, a ridiculously small number of people working on infrastructure. It's not sexy work. You probably don't know any of their names. And many of them, depending on where they are in the world, take pay cuts to do that work because it's meaningful to them. And so these funding sources, some of which are really profiting from, that work, that sort of like free rider program, free rider problem, they don't understand their role in the ecosystem. There's supposed to be this give back mechanism. We're supposed to be doing something, reinventing money, but there's no cycle there. And so there needs to be a mind shift, and I hope that that as we grow as a community and as we get new entrants who understand the value and the principles of what we're trying to do here, that they'll recognize that they have a role in this, and that is to give back and recognize that there is uncelebrated work being done on their behalf to enable what, you know, their companies and their profits, et cetera.
I think it's also like a particularly relevant question in Bitcoin because, you know, there's other successful open source projects like the Linux kernel which have solved their funding problem, but they've done so in a very centralized way, right? It's the Linux Foundation and IBM that fund most of that development. And I'm sure, you know, I'm not familiar with the Linux community, so maybe they know that that has their problems, but we definitely know that centralized funding will be a problem for Bitcoin. So not only is this sort of a hard problem that hasn't been solved outside of Bitcoin, it's like even more difficult for us because we definitely don't want 1, 2, 3 funding sources being the ones that pay all of the developers that move Bitcoin forward. So it is really difficult, and yeah.
Just historically, we did have a Bitcoin Foundation. That was the first funding source, and that was rejected by the community. You know, this autoimmune response of this centralization, and you know, we are allergic to this centralization unless you look too closely, and then we're not.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I don't know, you know, practically what is a sufficient level of decentralized funding. Is it 20, 30, 40, 50 organizations all contributing back to open source Bitcoin? I mean, at Block, at Spiral, you know, where we take up a very small portion of like Block's research budget, probably like less than 1%, and we have a dedicated team of like 10 people working on, 10, 12 people working on open source Bitcoin. Maybe that's a model that we'd want to see at some of the other large companies as well. But not just that, we want to see the full spectrum. People in this room, if you know you're so inclined to donate to developers, there are lots of mechanisms which you can do that as well. So I think we want the full range of like people willing, individuals just at the grassroots level, willing to contribute to back to open source monetarily, as well as like the larger organizations who see the value in Bitcoin and are well aligned.
And going through the same thread, I think another interesting question that comes to a lot of people's mind when we discuss decentralized funding or as well as the ecosystem as a whole is how exactly are you guys thinking about ensuring a high level of standard in the Bitcoin open source ecosystem while still maintaining a decentralized level in terms of both funding as well as education?
I didn't quite.
Yeah, can you say the first part of that question again?
So given how different this space is and the general ethos that we have of trying to decentralize things to ensure that there's no single point of failure, if we're looking at how we can maintain a high standard of developers coming into the space, what are the strategies that you guys are thinking in terms of funding as well as education?
So I'm going to pass on the funding because I think we've covered that. I'm going to go right to education because it's what I spend a lot of my time doing. So I've been working in education for about 10 years, well before I was involved with Bitcoin professionally. And I think it took me a really long time to find a model that really fit this ecosystem. So I worked in like the coding bootcamp industry, and teaching someone to code and finding them a job is like a very straightforward thing. You know what the deliverable is, and then when I got to Bitcoin, it was like, hey, we're just gonna put information in your hands. And the first project that we did was a residency. We invited eight people to spend the summer in New York, all expenses paid, from all over the world. Well, Carlo was one of them. And I think it was a life-changing experience for many of them. But it had a very concrete deliverable. You're on the outside, you don't work in Bitcoin open source. When you're done with this program, you will work in Bitcoin open source, and we will make sure that happens and you're funded, and that is your career now. So reinventing that has been really hard since COVID. it's really, you lose a lot of the, it's just not as tangible when you're doing it remotely. There's just a lot of entropy that is lost when you move from a medium of in-person to online. And so we've run different kinds of programs. We've done online seminars that are like discussion-based. We've done, like online coding programs. But nothing has been like that until this last January, where we really flipped the model of, instead of us selecting you, which is, I think, which is a system that very much mimics the current education system, at least where I'm from. You put in a college application, and you really hope that they choose you. And there's all sorts of ways to game that, and all sorts of optimizations. But ultimately, you're raising your hand, and you're hoping that someone picks you. What I think is great about the way I want to approach education in the future is flipping that and saying, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you're from, I don't want to meet you, I don't want to know you. I want to give you an opportunity to showcase what you're capable of, and then based on that, we will make sure that you can do this for the rest of your career. And that flip, that idea of moving from me picking you and then having all the biases that leak out of my brain of what I'm looking for, switch to you pick yourself and you prove that you can do it, and then we will fund that, has really changed my perspective on how we should be going forward.
Yeah, I'll add on a bit to that. I think, to me, the words scale and quality definitely are in great opposition to each other. So the question is, what are we actually trying to scale? And to me, it's the access to start doing this. So like Jonas said, I was a junior developer living at the bottom of Africa, never spoken to another Bitcoiner, and I saw a tweet and it changed my life, right? And I could have very easily not seen that tweet, and I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be doing this, and I'd be working.
Twitter changed lives.
Oh, yeah. It used to.
Takeaway.
It used to. But my life has forever changed because of that. And since I had that experience, the reason I work with organizations like B-Trust is because I want to do that for someone else, right? And shortly after that, I was put in touch with Al Mouton, who now works at Lightning Labs and contributes to Lightning, because we managed to find her. And I just think, where are all of the L's and the Carlas and the Duncans and the Novos and the Bubakars? We've just scratched the surface of finding people. So what we really want to scale is the top of the funnel, right? We want to reach them, we want to find them. People who put their hand up and say, I'm going to do good work and I am worth it. But what I don't think we actually need to scale is the bottom of the funnel, because introducing people to Bitcoin open source is very, very difficult, and it's very, very costly to the projects where we bring newcomers in. It takes a lot of time to skill them up and get them to the point where they can be meaningful contributors. And I think even today, we're almost saturated in the number of inbound new people we can take. So it's not so much of scaling the whole pipeline, it's increasing the decentralization and the democratization and whatever adjective you want to use at the top, and then making sure that we keep our rigorous funnel and we give chances to people that work hard and can do this work, because it's not going to be everyone. I don't think there'll ever be hundreds and hundreds of people flowing into Bitcoin open source. That's just not where we are right now. But if we can make sure that we give more people a shot and keep almost everything the same, I think that we'd be in a really good spot, because we have a better chance of finding those people who are going to go the distance.
Yeah, I don't want them to scare you too much, but I mean, working on Bitcoin Core is it takes special individuals, let's say, but the Bitcoin ecosystem has a vast array of projects that require, different levels of expertise. I think it's important to say. So, you might not be someone who is wanting or has the skill set or sees themselves doing protocol level development, but there are other types of projects that can be just as impactful for Bitcoin long term, whether it be you're focused on merchant solutions with BTC Pay Server, or you want to work on software development kits, or you're more interested in mining. So you don't necessarily have to view the most important piece of software in the ecosystem as the go-to for yourself. There is a range of capabilities that we're looking for as well, but nonetheless, it's still going to be challenging, and you're still going to need to push yourself. You said something about like we're keeping high standards of developers. I don't feel qualified to answer that question, but like Carla, do you feel like, I feel like the community of developers over many years have somewhat upheld high standards when it comes to Bitcoin development. Would you?
I think it's not so much the upholding of standards, because I think the processes we have in place in terms of review and, you know, people going through work, that does uphold the standard. The question is, what is the cost of upholding that standard, right? The more time people have to spend reviewing PRs that aren't ready, dealing with structural issues, like, so that quality is upheld, but the cost of upholding that quality can increase. And if we, you know, we can keep the quality the same, but maybe the productivity goes down because we are sort of acting as this immune system. So I think for the education programs and the pipelines that we work on, it really is operating with care and only giving people this chance, or not giving people this chance, because people are free to operate however they like, and we are in no way gatekeepers to this. But if you are trying to scale this thing, only giving people that doorway into open source and funding them when they're ready to do it, right? Doing it too early and giving out grants when someone's not ready to do the work can be incredibly damaging to the project and to the individual. So it's just about that duty of care, that due diligence, and making sure that you're considerate of the resources, the projects that you're contributing to. And just like you said, you know, a higher level wallet or something, application up the stack, will be more able to accept incoming than Bitcoin Core. And so just like managing that as a grant giving organization and really paying attention to it. I don't think that we wholesale do a good job at that in Bitcoin. Sometimes it seems like money is just sort of flying around a little bit. And maybe we could all be a bit more careful in the way that we deploy people and capital in open source environments.
Yeah, and I think one of the major things really that a lot of people have reached out in terms of trying to be involved in this space is there seems to be, from their perspective, a lack of either consistency or clarity when it comes to how to approach funding, especially from the developer perspective. So I'd like you guys to just briefly, because we're running a bit out of time, to just go through how you guys have been looking at criteria for grants, for example, and how developers can kind of match their skill set to reach that criteria, or at least get to a stage where they're eligible for those type of grants.
Yeah, I can say a little bit on Spiral. I said a little bit about it earlier, but I think a strong Bitcoin ethos is important. Understanding why Bitcoin's like a game changing for how we interact in society and a new form of money. All of that stuff we look for. To give yourself the best chance, it's important to be a self-starter and someone who can find their way into contributing the best they can. Obviously, the technical skills are required as well. The type of funding we do ranges from people who are very new to the space to people who have been contributing for multiple years and are a lot more seasoned. So we do allocate a portion of our budget to trying to help new people develop their skills in the space. We're focused on key areas, so privacy, security, scalability, and user experience as well. The user experience side is more focused on designers, which is like an area that is still kind of growing in the space and slowly becoming more valued. So we do see a lot of value in the design and user experience side of things as well. Yeah, I'd say like just being able to show a level of awareness and willingness to get your hands dirty and, you know, start contributing without necessarily having, you know, the battery put in your back initially. Like showing initiative ultimately is what we look for.
Yeah, we don't have a grant program, so but I work very closely with a lot of the people that go through our education programs and try to position them for grants. I would say the major things that I look for just generally when I'm looking at talented people, because I think that like being a good coder is just generally a function of time. I mean, you just get exposure and you get into it and you sort of like see people light up, and there's no brain, I think, that can't code. It just takes time, and some are better than others, but a lot of that is a function of work. I think, however, people that are willing to do all the jobs is an important one. So, you know, I've worked at startups as well and you know, done my own thing. And, you know, if you're not willing to like mop the floor, then this isn't going to be a good fit for you, because you are going to have to do a lot of just work that needs to get done. That is going to be part of being what an open source developer is. You're not going to be doing, you know, oftentimes sexy new features, because that's not what's needed. Like, a lot of protocol development in particular is making sure that this stuff continues to work, because if it breaks, Bitcoin's over. Like, you can all pack it up and go home. So the big job is to just continue to take care of the software that we have. I'll go into this more tomorrow when I give my talk. And the last thing that I think, it's now called B-Trust Builders, but it was originally called Kala, that I think I was really proud of in being involved with that program, is that it's just people that treated each other really well and were very appreciative. Just solid people who appreciate like the opportunities and are willing to pay it forward. So, you know, one of the things that I like most working with Carla is that she just gave you the story of seeing a tweet. It wasn't my tweet, because I think Twitter is terrible, but it was a tweet, and then she just like came out of nowhere, got a job at Lightning Labs, then worked, you know, on open source protocol development, and she at every step realized that someone had helped her, and she turned it around, and then she has done everything in her power to help everyone who's come across her path. And I think that's what makes Carla incredible. She is a very talented coder, and she is, you know, I think an incredible leader. But she is more than anything, she looks back on where she came from. She makes sure that other people can climb up after her.
Thank you. I think with my grant giving hat on, I'd say that I look for people who will be more help than harm. And the actual process of reviewing a grant, there's a lot of things that I will do when I look at a grant. I'll go and see what types of PRs someone has done and what types of projects they've contributed in. I will get a microphone that works. Okay. No, I'm good. I will go and look at the conversations they have with other contributors and see how they treated them and see how they responded to feedback. Like, it takes hours to do this. Like, it really is understanding who this person is, how they interact, and what they offer, and what their project scope is, and all of those things. But really it comes down to, will this person be more help than harm? And I think that you can actually tell it really early on. The way that people show up very early when they're struggling, generally I've found is indicative of how they will behave the whole way through. And I think with my developer hat on, when I think about open source, that it's been a while since I got started, the mind shift that you have to make is that this isn't about me anymore, and this isn't about ego. And I think it's very easy to show up at open source and think, I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to do this good first issue, and I'm going to have these PRs, and I'm going to get these green squares. And there's an anxious energy to all of that, which is sort of driving you because you want to do this thing and it's exciting. But finding the discipline to step back and think, how can I be helpful to this project? You know, really like mopping the floors. Like, is this good first issue really what I would want if I was the maintainer of this project? Or would I want someone to go and check one of my eye tests that was flaking and spend 3 days digging into it and fixing it? Because it's super annoying that everyone's PRs flake on this one eye test. Like, where is the real value I can add to the project, which is not about me, and it's about making other people's lives better. And when you go about Bitcoin open source like that, it makes your experience of it very pleasant. And if you go about it in a selfish and self-driven way, I suspect you will find it a very lonely and unrewarding way to work.
I'd just like to say we're out of time, and I think that was the perfect way to end it. Thank you all so much for providing your insight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Guys, we did it. We came to the end of the first day of Africa Bitcoin Conference 2024. Thank you so much. Yes. That's the energy. Keep it going, keep it going. Thank you for helping us, you set the tone for tomorrow and for Wednesday. We shall be here at 8:45 a.m. interacting outside, and the sessions that will start at 9:30. Ensure to be here on time because you're going to have really amazing people talking tomorrow. Make sure you have your SCED app downloaded so that you know who is going to be talking tomorrow. With that, have a beautiful night. Those with Nakamoto tickets, make sure you check your emails for more details of anything that is going to happen tonight. Thank you so much, Bitcoiners. Have a beautiful time throughout this conference. Give me music as they leave the conference room.